We start in Turkiye. Hundreds of people are still believed to be trapped in Antakya, a Hayat City in the country. Humanitarian group Gift of the Givers today joined other rescue workers in a search for life following the devastating earthquake. Multiple buildings have been razed to the ground as the death toll has surpassed the 12,000 mark. SABC News' senior reporter Chriselda Lewis and cameraman Manqoba Nkosi are in Turkiye as scores of families are still searching for their loved ones. Chriselda, over to you. Tell us what you're seeing and experiencing live from Turkey.
Well, Francis, absolute devastation. After arriving in this country several days ago, today we really got a true sense of what the impact of this earthquake had on the people of this country. There are still hundreds of families that are searching for their loved ones. This as rescue teams have been deployed to several parts of the country, and that is where they continue to look through or to comb through the rubble of buildings that have been completely razed to the ground. In the area where we were searching with the Gift of the Givers today, there are about 10 hospitals that have been completely destroyed in that particular area. It was quite painful to look at, the relatives of people who are still believed to be stuck underground. At this stage, there's no confirmation whether they are alive or if they've already passed on. This given as the clock is ticking, as the hours go by, these families are hoping that, the search as it continues throughout the night will continue, and that these rescue workers will bring back their loved ones alive. Today, in just one of the areas where we were, Francis, as you'd know, that the Gift of the Givers began its search with the Serbian team this morning. There were about 50 buildings where we were that had been completely destroyed. Schools have been destroyed, other infrastructure. These families have been crying, standing on the side of these heaps and piles of debris and rubble, hoping, praying that their loved ones will be brought to the surface alive. And a bit earlier on today, we spoke to some of those families that had been sitting on the sidelines, and we were told at one of the buildings, which you will see was part of the visuals that are on your screen currently, there were about 100 people in one of the buildings that had been completely destroyed, and 30 people had passed on by the time they had been brought to the surface, and at the time only 8 were alive. But the search continues, we understand, for scores more. Hence these families keep returning to these sites hoping for some good news. We saw some families also carrying photographs of their loved ones, showing them to the different rescue teams, asking, have you not seen my family member? Some of them have even, don't know where 5 of their family members are. So the true extent of the devastation is something that we experience today, and they're hoping that, as the days go by, you could see the anguish and the extent of the hurt and pain in their eyes. Some of them unable to contain their tears, throwing their hands in the air, begging the rescue workers to continue the search. And obviously, there have been quite a number of aspects that have hampered this search and rescue mission, which many say in the coming days should now be described as a recovery mission, given that as the clock keeps ticking, many say that the hopes of finding some people alive then would be dwindling. They're begging these rescuers to continue, and weather conditions here much earlier on, just shortly after the quake itself had struck, people indicated that the weather conditions had been hampering some of the search and rescue efforts as well. But from where we were, homes, flats, hospitals. We're also talking about warehouses. We're talking about cars where you have a pile of debris which is completely piled on top of cars in these various areas. And everywhere where you look around, it's just a nation in anguish. They're hoping that these rescuers will continue with this operation. And certainly it is, Francis, because we have also gone out for several hours. We were unfortunately not able to cross live from those particular locations because the signal there is so bad. In some areas, totally non-existent because the infrastructure itself has collapsed. So the government here, obviously, and this nation is clearly going to have a very rough couple of coming months or even couple of years in order to fix what we're seeing at the moment. But the immediate response to all of this is the rescue teams that have come in. When we moved into this area late last night, the sound of the ambulances, Francis, quite deafening. 10 ambulances at a time moving into this particular area, which will tell you that those hospitals that have collapsed, there's simply nowhere where you can take people who are lucky enough to have survived this tragedy. So they have to be taken from here to hospitals which are on the outskirts of this particular area, Francis. And I tell you, over the next couple of days, it's going to be more daunting as these people of these affected areas, which were 10 at the last instance, you'd recall, the president of this country had basically declared a state of emergency. And also, in particular, in the 10 areas that had been, or provinces that had been affected. But I can only imagine now that has way escalated. When we had come into Turkiye, at the time, the death toll had been standing at about shortly or a little over 5,000. We're talking about now a death toll that has way surpassed 12,000. And it is expected that it will rise as from the pictures that we've been seeing and where we have been monitoring the rescue operations, there are still hundreds of people who are still unaccounted for at this particular stage. So the assumption at this point is that as the clock ticks, as the days go by, there's a great chance at this time it will be an absolute miracle if some people will be found alive, because the hips and piles, we're talking about 12-story buildings that have collapsed. And we've spoken to some of the family members who've been affected, and they've indicated their loved ones were staying on the first floor. So if you have a 12-story building that is going to collapse or be razed to the ground, and we're talking about someone who is staying on the first floor, you can only imagine what has been taking place there. Painful scenes that we saw of, the families that have been affected are crying on the sides of the road, but also a point where I saw a nation here coming together. Francis, I must tell you, they're offering us water, that they're happy that the nations that have come here to assist have done so. They've been extremely thankful. We're being offered food, we're being offered water, and you'd almost swear that these are not individuals who are in agony and in distress. They're just happy that there are thousands of people who've come here to try and help find their loved ones. So over the next couple of days, we're going to continue on that trajectory, moving with these rescue teams to see what they're able to salvage there. This is as these people try to pick up the pieces of their lives. One of the gentlemen that we spoke to was removing from his shop what was remaining. He was selling baby formula and skin lotions, and he was just trying to remove whatever he could. Some of the buildings that have not completely collapsed are inhabitable. You simply cannot go back in there. So you have furniture, you have precious belongings, the little that is left of these individuals who've managed to survive, them trying to salvage what they can. So absolutely devastating. Today we got a true sense of what the extent of the damage and the destruction was, going out with the gift of the givers and the Serbian team who are working hand in hand today to try and assist these other rescue workers who had been here much earlier in trying to bring some kind of less distress, if at all there's such a word, to these thousands of people who have been affected by this tragedy. Back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Chriselda Lewis. It's hard to imagine the horror. She will be on the ground. She will continue, like she says, with Gift of the Givers.